Welcome back once more in New World Fantasy Football. And the Saints kind of come marching in slowly, crappy, bad form, all over the place, kind of wacky, but they're marching. They're marching to a 9-8 season, tied with the Bucks in record. Bucks took the division though. Paul, I think I already know, but how are you feeling about talking about the Saints?
Well, I'm fine to talk about the Saints because we are podcasters and that's what we do. I'm going to talk about every team in the NFL, but if I take the question to mean how do I feel about the Saints, fuck them. That's how I feel about the Saints.
So you don't Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, well, listen, man, like it's just obviously there's like the Bucks rivalry thing like going on. Like honestly, that's like a lot of it, but like what it is more so even than that is just what they've been doing from a fantasy football perspective over the last like few years, where it's just like I don't understand how a team can like consistently sort of contend for the playoffs, but yet be just so aggressively boring all the time. Like limited fantasy football goodness and opportunities. They have a stud wide receiver that they don't know what to do with. It's just like, even if you're not a Bucks fan / Saints hater like me, what's so great about the Saints? What is so good about them? Drew Brees was at least like as much as I don't like the Saints, like I respect Drew Brees for sure. But Derek Carr.
Yeah. Derek Carr is a very like average 1999 Corolla. It's the kind of car that he is. Nothing exciting. Just kind of gets you by, and that's gets you from point A to point B, and not fast, and just slumps its way there. So that's my car joke. I'm not the funniest, but we're going with it. I
mean, I think he's always been a 99 Corolla, but like that's giving him too much credit because the Corolla is dependable and will always get you to point A, point B. At this point, I don't know, man. I might.
Maybe he's a Ford Escort.
Yeah, I think he might be a Datsun.
A Saturn.
He was bad. He was bad this year.
Hey, I'm gonna throw some numbers out, and we're gonna see how he really was. So this is just overall offensive ranks. I'm gonna spit them out at you, okay? 23.6 points per game. That was good enough for 10th in the league, believe it or not. Yards per play, though, 5.1, which is 20th. I don't know. Go figure there.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
Red zone touchdown percentage, excuse me, 53.3%, which was 18th. So pretty middle of the pack there. The rushing percentage was 16th. So that was obviously right there, middle of the pack. But their yards per rush was 3.6, 31st in the NFL.
Tied with the Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay, exactly. So tied for last in their rushing efficiency. 17th in the pass makes sense, whatever, they're tied with somebody. Pretty much they were a very extremely balanced team, but their running attack was very underwhelming. Completion percentage, 67%, 7th overall, so very solid. Pass yards per game, 234.7, 11th, and they were actually 5th overall in time of possession. So they played a very dink and dunk, slow and steady, move the chains, not a ton of explosive plays, just a very pedestrian offense. And they put together those passing stats with mostly just low ADOT targets for everybody.
A bunch of dink and dunks, which is what we saw.
So what's the overall feeling you get from the Saints offense? Just off your top of your head, if those numbers play into it at all, like what is it? What do you feel about them?
Based on how I felt about them, like those numbers were not surprising at all. The only number that couple numbers that surprised me. I assumed that they had a more efficient rushing attack, and I'm actually very surprised that their rushing percentage was even that low. Like, I just thought that they wanted to run the ball more. But honestly, now that like I'm even hearing myself say that out loud, I think they kind of had the same thing going on as Tampa. They kind of just ran through the air. Just a bunch of little dribbles like up the field, and I just think overall it's just mid. It's just a mid offense. Like,
Yeah.
I personally was on the team that I thought that Derek Carr might be an upgrade from Jameis Winston, or the terrible Taysom Hill experiment and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it really does pretty much line up with what I thought.
Yeah. And like the few explosive plays throughout the season seem to come through. Sometimes Taysom Hill, but every so often they'd hit Shaheed for a big play. Olave here and there. He had a few, but I'll illuminate that later when we get to Chris Godwin. So their defense, I wanted to talk about their defense just a little bit. I'm going to spare the numbers. The numbers aren't really that important, but for the most part, I'll say they were this. They were a top 5 defense against the pass and a bottom 10 defense against the run. So a lot of teams were able to run the ball on them, and they pretty much were very difficult to pass against. And we saw that throughout the fantasy season. They were not, when you saw your wide receivers against the Saints and your quarterbacks against the Saints, usually you saw a red next to them if you're playing on sleeper. And then your running backs, typically you saw green. So that all checks out. But yeah, I mean, just not the most fun team. Their fantasy assets for the most part were underwhelming, if you ask me. Michael Thomas was pretty underwhelming for the first half of the season, and then he was injured second half of the season. So
what a shock.
Yeah, constantly injured. He shouldn't be back with the Saints, I'll say that. But Derek Carr, for all you Derek Carr truthers out there, he's going to be back because the Saints already restructured his contract. They're doing more cap fun as they've done for years. Probably going to be looking to bring in some free agents and retool this team again.
They never want to do it. Like, I've never seen a football team that is so committed to consistently pursuing getting out of the first round, maybe. Like, that's all that you can do. Like they looked at that offensive ranks, like everything that you just told me right now. They looked at that and they said, yes, run it back. We want 2 more years of that. And they've been doing that ever since Breeze went away. Like they never want to hit the reset button, Andrew.
I think there's a lot of teams that they feel, and especially now that they're letting more teams into the playoffs, the tank is going to be a lot less teams that are willing to do it because they feel they have enough to just make the playoffs. And I think that the Saints, I don't remember if I said this last episode. I think I did. They're in a 3-way struggle between Tampa and Atlanta to just edge the other one out and make the playoff, but be the division winner, really. So they're not going to do that because they're looking across the division and they're saying, Bryce Young, we're not really scared of him. At least not right now. Maybe they never have to be. We're certainly not worried about what they got going on in Atlanta with their quarterbacks. And yeah, Baker has had a good season last year, but we think we can be better. We think we have a plan to beat them and whatever. So the Saints are not willing to throw away a chance at being a division winner because they're all there. If they were in another division, if they were in the AFC, what is it? The West with the Chiefs West and the Chargers and all that. they would be like, all right, screw it. We don't have a chance to really win this division. So, okay, maybe we can tear it down now instead of just continue to just kind of push my my IRS taxes back further and further and further. So that's kind of my theory about why the Saints are doing what they're doing.
Good. I'm glad, because when the inevitable implosion does happen, it's going to be even funnier when they have no answers at quarterback and no cap flexibility. So I'm glad. I'm glad that's what's happening.
Is this a Bart Scott moment? Can't wait.
Yes, it is.
So,
well, I mean, you kind of said it earlier, Andrew, but like, you drafted Chris Olave early. I went Chris Olave in a different league because we both were.
I didn't. I wanted to, and I couldn't. He got drafted one pick before me. Remember?
Well, then that was a good thing, because
I ended up with Patrick Mahomes, so that's
okay,
that's a whole nother story.
But
I was excited for Chris Olave. That's true.
We were both excited for Chris Olave because whatever I think of Derek Carr's like midness, I thought that he would be able to at least get the ball to their best playmaker, ascending second-year wide receiver that had a lot of upside. Didn't materialize. How come?
No, I mean, so we'll just, I'm talk about Derek Carr first, and I'll jump into Olave, but just some things on Derek Carr. So, like I said, he will be back, contract restructured. He had 4 games this season with 0 touchdowns. Oof. He had 5 games with only 1 touchdown pass. When I'll just say this to add this bonus little sprinkle in. He doesn't add anything on the ground. He didn't have like any yards. Nothing, not contributing on the ground.
But we knew that coming in.
Yeah, in his younger years with the Raiders, it wasn't like expected, but he did it a little bit. But this year, nothing. Finished as the QB 16 overall, which you could say is mid, but I'm going to say this year it's below average because so many quarterbacks got hurt.
Absolutely.
That's kind of a fake 16 overall, which, it's not really what you're looking for, even in a completely healthy year anyway. He had 1 game as the QB1, which was week 18. So take that how you will. And then he had a couple games late in fantasy playoff land where he was a top 10 quarterback. He was, or really top 7. Week 15 versus my Giants without Chris Olave, by the way, which is funny. And week 16 versus the Rams, he was actually the QB3. He had a few big games where he threw over 2 touchdowns. He threw 3 touchdowns in those games. And, he looked a little better. But the thing with Derek Carr is there's just nothing exciting about him. He's a decent spot start at times, but he's really not anybody that you're going to be throwing in your lineup. You're happy to put in your lineup every week. So, you got any thoughts on Derek Carr besides that?
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're going to get more into Chris Olave, I would want to talk about Chris Olave in the context of this upcoming season. But no, I have no more thoughts about Derek Carr because Derek Carr is not a guy that I'm thinking about at all going into this year. The only context in which I'm thinking about Derek Carr is just remembering in my mind to like nerf the ADPs of all Saints players. Named Kamara because he gets a lot of noodle arm dump offs. He loves the noodle arm dump offs. But
so I'll talk a little quickly about.
You have some stats on Kamara.
Yeah, so Kamara, I'll talk about Kamara a little bit. Missed the first 3 games of the season, had that suspension. Still ended up as the RB14, which is pretty impressive, missing 3 games. He tied for second with Bijan in total targets. Breece Hall had the most, by the way, with 95 targets from the running back position. Holy crap.
Another incapable quarterback that's trying to run through the air.
But he honestly, on his pace, if he played the whole season, more than likely he would have been first because Breece Hall didn't miss any time. So that goes to show you he had 2 games. Kamara had 2 games where he had 14 targets. That is nuts.
It was unbelievable. The volume he was getting through the air was unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah, that was crazy. And a lot of games where he was over 5 targets, a lot of games in the 7 to 8 range targets. So he was a very highly targeted guy. If you play in full PPR, he was amazing for you. But only 3.9 yards a carry. And I just, to put that in context, I know last episode we talked about Rachaad White, and he's in a even worse than 3.9. What was he, 3.7, 3.6?
3.6.
But just the range that Alvin Kamara was as a runner is really bad. So Alex Madison, also these guys are 3.9 or more than 3.9, but the same range. Alex Madison just got cut. Broke news today that he's going to get cut by the Vikings. Donta Foreman and your favorite, Najee Harris. And Najee Harris had 4 yards a carry. So he was a less efficient runner.
Yeah, and evidently it was an awful rushing attack. In fact, I think they had Taysom Hill do some rushes up the middle. So I think Kamara is a more well-known and better resume version now of Rachaad White. So another guy that I would caution people about drafting where they finished last year. I will say that.
Yeah, I think Kamara next year, we'll get into the next year stuff, but I'm not extremely worried about him, assuming that he's not going to be looked at as a early second round, late first round pick. I think that's going to be too rich. So Chris Olave, man, let's talk about Chris Olave. Olave. Whoa.
Why couldn't Hayden ever figure it out? It was something that consistently pissed me off and bothered me all year long, that I just could never understand. Like, I just didn't get it. They looked like not on the same page. It didn't look like a guy that was like getting frozen out, or a guy that was like, oh, we're just not going to target him, whatever. It just looked like a quarterback and a receiver that had no chemistry.
It was, because he got plenty of targets, man, throughout the season. He really did. He was highly targeted, and it's funny. So he finished the 19th wide receiver overall. Not horrible, but really not what you drafted him to be. And I think it's funny. You can do the experiment at home right now. Open up your sleeper app, go to Chris Olave, pull up the game logs from his rookie year and his sophomore year, his past year, and just look at the yards per catch. And if you use Sleeper, you know it's going to show up in green for the really juicy stats that you like, yellow if it's kind of mid-tier, and red if it's not good. Last season, and this is a reason why so many people were excited for Chris Olave, every single week, literally every single week last year, his yards per reception was green. It's what you want. Those deep targets, those catches that are going to get you a lot of points in fantasy.
Well, Carr doesn't like throwing those to anybody but Rashid Shaheed, apparently.
Yeah, and this year it was very mixed. He even had some in the red, a lot of yellow, and a few green. So I don't want to spit out all those numbers, but just go look and you'll see what I mean. But he was targeted, just didn't have the same level of explosive plays. And he still did have 5 100-plus yard games when they targeted him downfield a bit. Those two things correlated. That's where Chris Olave wins. He wins in the intermediate to deeper part of the field all the time. And he has a quarterback that I don't know exactly what the problem is. Is he scared to stay in the pocket? Is he seeing ghost? Whatever it may be. He just is like, all right, no time. Throw it to Kamara. No time. Dump off to, my tight end. Slant to Michael Thomas if he's still alive. But
he's not.
Mismatch. It's a mismatch it's sad because Chris Olave's upside was capped this year. And I think we know what Derek Carr is at this point. He's not going to change and become somebody who's going to be a gunslinger all of a sudden and boost Chris Olave. So I think you're going to see a lot more of the same from Chris Olave. The only thing you could say that would be positive going forward is, hey, well, at least he's going to be a third-year wide receiver, really starting to come into his prime, and that could boost him up a little bit. But I'm of the mind that, well, the quarterback, unfortunately, has a lot more say in the potential fantasy output of a receiver.
Yeah, I mean, look, for whatever reason it is, it probably has something to do with the coaching. It has maybe something to do with Chris as well. Like, part of getting on the same page and getting chemistry with your quarterback is putting in the work to get on the same page and getting chemistry with your quarterback. So that's something to watch. But also, I think it's as simple as Derek Carr not trusting his fucking arm. Like, he doesn't trust his arm to let that play develop and go hit it. Like, they're gonna try to take the profit with their little dinks and dunks and have a try to win like a boring suck fest. Another reason why I just dislike the Saints, and it's a bummer because Chris Olave, the player, I want to buy into him. I want to buy into him. He finished the 19th overall receiver last year. I suspect because of his name, because of his talent, because of who he is, I suspect that he's not going to be on the board at wide receiver 19.
I don't either. I think people are still going to want to give him a shot as a wide receiver one, even on some rosters.
So where is your like comfort ouch level for him in terms of
Yeah,
like
I'm kind of thinking
care?
about that right now. Is like, okay, well, we talked about him last episode. Is he gonna go after Mike Evans?
He shouldn't. And I mean, this isn't
But is that a
dynasty,
fair range?
right? It's one season. I would rather have Mike Evans over Chris Olave, and to me that's slander on the Saints and Derek Carr, not slander on a young stud wide receiver.
Right. So, find me another name that to go with Chris Olave that you feel
would be kind of in that range. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in my pre-mocks or anything like that yet, but just off the top of my head, okay.
What about like a Jordan Addison? Would you rather have Olave or Jordan Addison?
Wow, that's a good one. No, I in theory, Chris Olave is the wide receiver one on this team still. In theory.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
I think the fact that it's even close is kind of says all you need to say.
It's damning.
And it sucks because yes, everybody wants Olave to be what we think he can be, which is a downfield threat that's going to catch long touchdowns and be like Tyler Lockett, but with a little bit more physicality to him. So that's enough about Olave.
It's not impossible for Olave to improve. Just his ability to just win in short area and adjust to the offense, but it's a crime. It's a crime if they are not able to make better use out of what his best skill set is, which is winning the 5 second, winning the 3 to 5 second battle, not the 2 second battle, right?
Yeah, and then to get a receiver that's going to be productive to that level with short area targets, you're asking him to be Deebo Samuel, and he's not Deebo Samuel.
No. If you want a Deebo, get Deebo. You got a different guy.
Exactly. So moving on to a very familiar name, pretty much his name is as plain as the team, Mike Thomas. Oh, man. So he was getting roughly 8 targets a game up until he got injured again. He's pretty much just got the injury-prone stamp on him now. His best finish last year was wide receiver 21. He's a short area guy. and he's a possession guy that doesn't have the touchdowns he had that one magical year.
He's more burnt than like yesterday's rye toast. I'm out.
Yeah, man. He's more than likely gonna get cut by the Saints.
They need the cap money anyway.
Yeah, and he's 30 and he's injury prone. It's kind of a no-brainer, I think. I don't think the Saints will do this, but their fan base is probably going to be pretty upset because Mike Thomas has been a mainstay in their New Orleans for like 8 years. So it's a shame, but realistically, logically, they should let him go. They should cut him. I don't really have much to say about Mike Thomas except for his time as a fantasy contributor is over, and that's it.
As we go on, we remember. Cue the music, cue the violin. Michael Thomas, somebody in your league out of 12 dudes, someone is going to see the name of Michael Thomas, and they will say, what's that quote from Arrested Development? These people delude themselves every year that it'll work for them, and it never does.
But it might work for us.
It might work for us.
Yeah.
That's the story of who's going to be the Michael Thomas drafter in your league.
That's pretty much the Kadarius Toney right there.
Yes.
But I don't like the only other player that I really care to talk about. I mean, really two, but I'll start with Kendre Miller. Just a wasted season for him. Week 18, he had 13 carries for 73 yards, which was good for a 5.6 yards per carry. That might excite some people. I'm not putting a ton of stock in it, and I'll tell you why. Basically, throughout his draft process, I just was never a fan. I watched his tape, and I was like, I am not seeing it at this guy. I just wasn't. So that's just me. But really what it comes down to next season for fantasy players is, do you believe in Kendre Miller, the player, or not? And guess what? Kamara's not going away. So you saw what the yards per carry for the Saints was. I don't think Kendre Miller is going to be getting involved and making it all that much better, splitting carries with Kamara, and who knows the level of involvement. But I'm just a no-go on Kendre Miller.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was more of a Kendre. Man, truther's a strong word. I was a Kendre stasher last year. I kind of held that stock for a while, and I'm not willing to like sell all of my Kendre stock necessarily. But for me, he's more of a guy that is like, if you buy into him, I've seen all the same things you've seen, Andrew. I don't see a ton of explosion with him. He's not a Kamara 2.0, but he's maybe it's a scheme fit. Maybe the coaching staff really likes him. So like a very, very late flyer of an obvious backup to a really, really high level but aging running back, I think is a decent bet, but I am not banging the table for Kendre whatsoever.
Yeah, and I feel you there. I'll say this. Every single year in fantasy, which is what makes this game great, there are paths to success for players that us as a community just never see. And then all of a sudden, a guy becomes a star or even a viable player. I mean, this past season, Puka Nacua.
You probably didn't. I was going to say you probably weren't super impressed with Kyron Williams' college tape, right? But like,
I wasn't.
The man did it.
Sometimes players level up; they're in the right situation, or you just don't see it, and they're better than you think for whatever reason. There's a million stories of that in the NFL and in fantasy football, but that's a vision I don't see Kendre Miller being a viable starter, but you never know. It's a long season. Things happen. He might be. So, overall projections for the Saints, man. What are you thinking?
I mean, they're running it right back. So why not more of the same? They're going to end up with somewhere in the range of 7 to 9 wins, depending on how healthy they stay. And yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Alvin Kamara. I'm going to be really interested to see where his ADP really lands. I mean, in this point of the offseason, ADPs are too all over the place, but
Yeah.
You know, I think that the Carr and Kamara marriage is a much better marriage than the Carr Olave marriage, because Kamara is going to be soaking up all those juicy noodles. So I think it's really more of the same. If you're a Rashid Shaheed guy, in theory, he might take on a little bit more of the passing work, but I just don't. I
think he is what he
I just don't
is.
see where the upside is necessarily. Olave,
He's a weekly upside guy, not a season-long guy.
yeah.
He's too boomer bust. And I think that's his style of play. You know, he's going to be a guy who's going to run deep. And when he gets past the defense, Derek will take a shot every so often.
Mike Thomas being gone, or presumably gone, is good in the sense that should give us a little bit more pass consolidation for the other two names. So maybe Shaheed takes a level up.
I'll say this too. Kind of your dark horse player there to look at is A.T. Perry.
Yeah.
He showed a little bit of flashes late in the season. Yeah. He's a big receiver. I think that'll be good for Derek Carr. He'll be interesting. He'll be interesting to keep an eye on. He's a radar guy for me. But yeah, I think Carr being back, Kamara is still going to be very viable. And I just don't want to overpay for Kamara, because I think it is going to be more of the same, because they are going to pretty much run it back for the most part. We'll see what they do in the draft. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. I'm guessing they're going to be, maybe they add a wide receiver, maybe a lineman, maybe somebody on defense. Who knows? But yeah, I think this team is going to be kind of bled. And let me say this. The Saints also were benefited. Their 9-8 record, they had across the board the easiest schedule in the NFL. That's not going to be the case this year coming up.
No, and it's safe for us to both say, Andrew, that like all of our previews at this point in the offseason all are tentative and have caveats. Like this is a preview right now as it stands. The draft and the rest of free agency is going to change everything, and we are going to address it again. But I don't have any more thoughts. The New Orleans Saints, I hope they don't have a good season. They're probably going to end up fighting us for the division lead again, because that's how it always happens. Can't wait.
Can't wait, man. The Saints, I don't think they're going to be marching in very strongly next season. I think that they're going to take a little bit of a step back record-wise, if you ask me, just because their record was a reflection of the easy schedule. And the division, I think, is going to get marginally stronger. And they're not going to be playing, I forget what division they ended up playing in their whole schedule. I can't remember that, but I know it was the easiest schedule in the NFL. That's not happening.
Good. I'd rather it be Atlanta. If the Bucs take a step back and the Saints take a step back, I'm fine. I just don't want the Saints to win.
We talked about it before. A lot of Atlanta is going to be what quarterback they end up with, but we'll see, guys. That's wrapping up the NFC South. And Paul and I haven't discussed where we're going next, but it'll be a fun surprise.
Ooh, surprise for me too. I don't have a freaking clue. I hope you enjoyed it, ladies and gentlemen. Like, subscribe, do all the things, and stay tuned for the next Post-Mortem.